about to begin the service, and this modern Jewish world, the initial ritual is turning off the cell phones. So please do that. Turning. Polo markrab, amar markrab, polo sarakatsir, polo fasdot tzitza sadeh. Yesh katsir nanatzit ki ruach elena shvado. Achin katsir ha'am yabesh katsir nanatzit uvar Eloheinu yafumu olam. A voice says, "Cry out," and I say, "What shall I cry? All flesh is grass, and all its beauty is like the flower of the field. The grass withers, the flower fades, but a wind of the Lord blows upon it. Surely the people are grass. The grass withers, the flower fades, but the world of our God shall endure forever." From Psalm 15. Mizmor David Adonai yagur ba'ohalecha mishkot b'har kodshecha v'lev tamim ufal tzedek v'dober ha'megdolot. Do we deserve to enter God's sanctuary? Can we merit a place in the presence of God? Live with integrity, do what is right, speak the truth without deceit, have no slander upon your tongue, do no evil to others, do not mistreat your neighbor, spurn a contemptible person, but honor those who revere the Lord. Never retract a promise once made, nor doing you harm. Lend no money at unfair rates, accept no bribe against the innocent, make these deeds your own, then shall you stand firm forever. It says, if that psalm was written about Adonai Marcus. Mizmor David Adonai Romi lo echsa. V'notadeshi al-Mitzeni al-Nebenuth Dinah-Haleni. Nafshi Yishoveh Yadcheni B'mad Tzedek L'man Shemol. Gam ki elef B'Yitzam B'Yisrael L'Akyetam. Shiv Techal Mishantecha Hemi Yinachavu V'Taroch L'fanai Shochan B'Yitzor. Ishanta V'Sheven Roshi Kosi V'Layam. Achtov V'Chesed V'Funi Kol Yimei Chayai. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. God makes me to lie down in green pastures. God leads me beside the still waters. God restores my soul. God guides me in straight paths for God's name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil, my cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. In this modern poem from Dr. Philip Bowley, this is my prayer to you, my God, let not my spirit wither and shrivel in its thirst for you, lose the dew with which you sprinkled it when I was young. May my heart be open to every broken soul, to orphan life, to every stumbling, wandering, unknown, groping in the shadow. Bless my eyes, purify me to see humanity's beauty rise in the world and the glory of my people in its redeemed land, spreading its fragrance over all the earth. Deepen and broaden my senses to absorb a fresh, green, flowering world, to take from it the secret of blossoming in silence. Grant strength to yield fine fruit, quintessence of my life, steeped in my merit being without expectation of reward. And when the time comes, let me slip into the night, the name not the God of humanity or Joshua Heschel. The deepest wisdom that a person can attain is to know that one's destiny is to aid, to serve. We have to conquer in order to succumb. We have to acquire in order to give away. We have to triumph in order to be overwhelmed. The human person has to understand in order to believe, to know in order to accept. The aspiration is to obtain. The perfection is to dispense. And this is the meaning of death. The ultimate self-dedication to the divine. Death, so understood, will not be distorted by the craving for immortality, for this act of giving away is reciprocity on man's part for God's gift of life. I'm sure there is not one person in this congregation this morning who couldn't come up here and
and speak words of praise in honor of Abe Marcus. But we're going to begin with people who are closest to Abe. Those are the people who know us best, and they're going to be a variety of people. And so we begin though with his grandchildren.
Hi everyone, I'm Talia. I'm Abe's oldest grandchild. My Zadie was truly a one-of-a-kind human. He was someone who could make you feel so special just by talking to him for even a few minutes. He'd always ask me, how's school, Tal? How's work? He'd even text me the scores of the Illinois-Purdue game every time we played each other, and either rub it in my face or congratulate me on the win. Whatever topic we were discussing at the time, I always knew to take it in and listen because his advice and guidance were something to cherish. Zadie always knew how to make me laugh. He'd be cracking jokes left and right at the dinner table or busting your chops just for the heck of it. But he was also someone who made it known how much he loved you. Now, if you did not know, my Zadie has 4 granddaughters, right here, over there, who he loved immensely. And like many grandparents, he would never dare to pick a favorite. However, he did want us to know how much we meant to him. So his trick was to say, "You're my favorite granddaughter in," and then say the city or the town we lived in at the time. So for me, he would say, "You're my favorite granddaughter in Deerfield." And more recently, he said, "My favorite granddaughter who is a college graduate." He always wanted us to know how much he cared about us, but also wanted to make it known that his other grandchildren were just as important, and I'll never forget that. The last thing I'll share is a text my Zadie sent to me before I left for college that I found yesterday. It reads, "Hi Tal, wishing you abundant success as you begin a new chapter in your life. Don't be so serious that it diminishes the experience. Be serious enough to achieve success. I love you." He always had a way with words. The world truly lost a legend this week. I'll miss you so much, Zadie, but I know you will always be in my heart wherever I go. My favorite grandfather in South Bend.
I'm Adam. I'm Abe's oldest grandson and his favorite grandson in the United States. While I was writing this eulogy this morning, it took me honestly a while to get words on the page. Not really because I didn't have anything to say, but because I just had way too much to say. And I seriously never met another person like my Zadie. The last thing I said to him was that he was one of my biggest role models, and that just I want to grow up to be at least half the man that he was. When I was younger, I always found it so fascinating. He had so many different jobs, most of which had nothing to do with each other. I remember finding it so strange that I could easily say that my dad was a doctor or my other grandpa was a lawyer, but I could never really explain what my Zadie's job was. It's just because he did everything. From real estate to the warehouse to the trucking company to all the different boards he sat on, he could just do everything. And whenever someone needed help with something, they would just ask Abe. And as a kid, this fascinated me. When I was in about middle school, I remember I was driving in the car with him, and I asked him, "Why do you have so many different jobs? I could never understand why someone at his age needed to work so much." And he told me that he doesn't have to do any of these jobs, but that someone does. The job has to be filled. And he said that if he's able to do it, that he might as well be the one to do it. And I'll never forget that. I mean, what kind of person says that? That was my Zadie, and it really has motivated me to this day. My Zadie was the absolute world to me. He was one of my best friends, and I have so many memories that I could share. If you don't know, my whole life I've wanted to be a pilot, and for years, one of my biggest goals was to fly an airplane from Chicago to South Bend to see my buddy Zadie. And when I was 18 years old, starting my flight training, I got to do that for the first time. And I'll never forget taxiing off the runway onto the ramp and seeing my Zadie, who, by the way, was on the board of the airport. Standing there waiting for me, and there's just no better feeling than that. He was one of my favorite people to call when I had a new accomplishment, because I could just always tell how happy it made him and how proud he was of me. And every time he'd pick up the phone, he'd say, "What's going on, Captain?" Even just a few weeks ago, I was sitting at home in Arizona when I got a call from my Zadie, and it was around 1 a.m. in South Bend. So I was honestly a little worried because I thought something bad had happened. And I answered the phone, and he said, the first thing he said was, "How long does it take for a pilot to upgrade from first officer to captain?" I was so caught off guard, and I told him, I said, about the airline I'm going to about 2 years. And I said, "How come?" And he said, "I couldn't sleep. I was just up thinking about it, and I wanted to ask you." That was my Zadie, just always thinking about others and checking in on them. My Zadie was a hero to me. Growing up, I always thought he was like the mayor of South Bend. Everyone knew my Zadie. My Zadie always knew them. And this past summer, I drove to South Bend to have lunch with my buddy and Zadie, which was one of my favorite things to do. After lunch, my Zadie needed to run a few errands, so I went along with him. And one of the stops we made was at the bank. And some things were taking a little while. And my Zadie was making his normal jokes with the bank teller, just joking around. And he kept making her laugh, and she said to me, "You are so lucky to have him as your grandpa." If you know my Zadie, you probably knew how proud he was of his grandchildren. He made that pretty clear. And I certainly know we all knew this. I just really hope he knew how proud we were to have him as our Zadie.
Hi, my name is Ava. I'm also another one of Zadie's granddaughters. So every year on Zadie's birthday, I would write him a card. And in every card, I found myself writing the same thing. "You are such a great role model for our family." I would write this so frequently that Lila would ask me, "Why do you write the same thing every single time?" I wrote this not because there weren't other things to say, but because I truly believed a role model encompassed everything Zadie was. A role model is someone who is resilient, committed, humble, and always grateful. Everything that Zadie was to me. Usually, an image of home is associated with love, warmth, and safety. Zadie was that home for everyone in our family. Bubby and Zadie built their house, much too big for simply the two of them, but just big enough for the entire family. I would cherish the few times a year we would all come together to Bubby and Zadie's house and squeeze together on their iconic farm couch. Zadie was always that much happier when everyone was around, and I was too. Some of my most memorable moments with Zadie were based around food. All throughout the pandemic, we would often meet Bubby and Zadie in the middle between South Bend and Chicago. Whenever my dad told me we were going to do this, one restaurant immediately came to mind: Pesto's in Valparaiso. Despite the countless times we ate there, somehow Zadie never got tired of their food. I realized that he wasn't really there for the food, but was ultimately there to be with us. When my Zadie was going through his cancer treatments, I noticed an abundance of Twinkies just sitting on the shelves in the pantry at their house. I asked him, "Zadie, why do you have so many Twinkies in your pantry?" He explained to me that his doctors told him he needed more fat in his diet in order to gain weight. My mom, sitting next to me, responded with, "What about a good healthy fat, like an avocado?" Sadie's prompt response was that Twinkies were his good, healthy fat. And as I stand up here and see all of you that have come to support my Zadie, I hope that I can live a life just as fulfilling and full of love as his was.
Hi everyone, my name is Lila and I'm Zadie's fourth grandchild. My Zadie was a generous, loving, and hardworking person. I want to share a few memories with you all. In April of 2013, my Zadie had a liver transplant. He named his liver Lincoln, you know, like Abraham Lincoln. Every early April, he would say, "It's almost Lincoln's birthday." And despite my Zadie typically being a pretty serious person, he would always find a way to make us laugh. My Zadie valued his family very much. Often, Zadie and Bubby would drive 2 hours from South Bend to Chicago for lunch or dinner and then drive all the way back home, just to spend time with us. On top of that, he was always very generous. He paid the bill, tipped the server, and would flip me in $100 under the table, just because. Zadie never called me by my full name, Lyle. He always said, "Lyle," or "Hey, Lyle." When I was younger, Zadie would take me fishing at the pond behind his house. He'd always bring out my fishing pole, the baits, and my pink chair with princesses on it. Yeah. Even though we both knew I would never catch a fish, he was always a good sport and was willing to take me. So today, I don't think my Zadie would want us to be sad. In fact, he'd say, "What are you crying for?" So instead, we should smile and take this day to celebrate his life.
Now we want to call upon one of his best friends, Mark Senda. Express appreciation to Mark for making sure that Abe was never alone the whole time after he passed away. Mark made sure that there were Charlene watchers sitting with Abe the whole time so that Abe could be taken care of. Even when
How does one even begin to collect their thoughts of a friendship that has spanned over 45 years and intertwined so many aspects of our lives? Shortly after moving back to South Bend in 1975, I met Abe while we served on the board of the South Bend Hebrew Day School. We clicked right away as our vision for the school evolved. I became president of the school, followed by Abe. Working together, I was so impressed by his business acumen and negotiating skills as we worked with the Sisters of the Holy Cross to negotiate a lease of the building on Erskine Manor. Everyone here is connected to Abe through his long reach into so many parts of our community. He has been president of more boards than I even knew existed. And he took each position seriously, always elevated the stature of the board, or of a committee, or a business, or a relationship that involved him. That's because his ethics were beyond reproach, his leadership's direct and strong, and he was a team builder. He showed these same qualities in the successful businesses he ran. No wonder he was inducted into the Wall of Fame of South Bend. He was a go-to person for our whole family, my parents, Susan and I, our kids, anything that we might need. He was just so connected. In fact, we would say about Abe, one call does it all, just call me. But to me, most of all, he was a friend. Our family introduced his family to their first and probably only camping experience. State Park. We enjoyed baseball at Wrigley Field, and for many years took an annual trip to Las Vegas with a bunch of guys. And he showed me how easy it was to lose money in life. We golfed together and spent more time talking about our families than I'm actually concentrating on our mutually mediocre golf game. Susan and I had tickets with Abe and Sarah to the Warsaw Theater, where we went monthly for dinner and a play for many years. Whenever it snowed, I could count on Abe to be at our house to plow our driveway before I went to work at 5 a.m. For several years, Abe and my wife Susan would walk in our neighborhood starting at 5:30 in the morning. I am sure that the neighbors were talking because they saw me leave at 5:15. Abe would show up and carry with his duffel bag into the house before they walked. We watched each of our kids grow up. We attended their weddings, followed their varied career paths, and for the last several years, puffed up our chests when we talked about our grandkids. My stomach turned and my heart sank when, as his doctor, I had to tell Abe he had liver cancer. It's one of the pleasures and difficulties of taking care of your friends. But it was the beginning of a journey that brought us inseparable. Abe was such a fierce fighter, and I tried to be there as a physician, coach, friend, along with so many of his friends and family that we see here today. He survived nearly 15 years after the diagnosis, including a major liver operation and a transplant, and he suffered quietly with some subsequent major complications. I accompanied him on many of his frequent visits to Northwestern over the years. And he often mentioned that my presence with his doctors brought him comfort. Other friends as well had the opportunity to do this, and I'm sure that they hold those memories dear. He would let me drive his Tesla, and we'd always stop at his favorite deli. Our conversations during those drives touched on deeply personal things and cemented a bond that will endure past our earthly presence. It was during one of those drives about 3 years ago that Abe mentioned to me how important it was for him to have sitters with the body from the time of death until the funeral, so that the body was never left alone. Right there on that drive, he and I made a promise to each other that whichever one of us died first, the other one would make sure that there was a shmir, a watchman, over the body. Well, so much of the promise fell on me, and it was such an honor to arrange for sitters. So many of the friends of Abe called me, volunteered to sit all day, all night. There wasn't a minute left that he was left alone. And I want to thank you all who did call me. As a primary care internist, one of the highest callings I ever felt was to help accompany patients through their final journey. These last 3 weeks rewarded me with the most intimate time and conversations with Abe and his dear family. Abe knew in his heart that he was going to die, and we were all able to hear things directly, some of the things that were very dear to us, and I know he shared thoughts with each of his family members as well. Even though I was not a direct family member, but because Abe and I were so keenly aware of his other medical problems, I felt he would like me to help guide the family about his overall prognosis, as they were concentrating on the daily tasks and decisions that needed to be made. Eric, RJ, Sharna, and Sarah were so involved and talked with the doctor and challenged them every step of the way, all in the name of love. I was impressed, so impressed, but not surprised that they left their families, their businesses, and were there all of the time that they could be over the last couple of weeks. The family was with him when he slipped away. They made all the right decisions, in my opinion, and if ever there was a good death, this certainly ranks right up there, even if the timing was a little premature. In closing, throughout our long relationship, I was able to share my deepest thoughts, fears, triumphs, frustrations, feelings, and hopes with Abe. We would challenge each other to find the best solution to any problem, meet any headwind, and enjoy life's simple pleasures. Abe's thoughts were not always easy to hear, but I always knew they came from his heart with the best intentions, and in our case, a special kind of love. I can still hear his voice echoing within me whenever he would answer the phone. Usually he would greet me with a hello, or if he was busy, I'd get a hello, and I'd always know the difference. I'm sure you all can relate to it whenever you call. Your memory is a blessing, my friend. As I navigate life, reflecting on the kernels of wisdom you taught me, the laughs we shared, and mostly the love of each other and our families that formed our bond. I love you.
I would like to call about
Good afternoon.
Everybody in our office worked for the teachers, cared about it. We knew everybody worked, everybody. So when he was ill, and everybody was constantly questioning, how's he doing, what's going on? They cared, we knew everybody that worked. And so when Eric Marcus called me last Friday about the day, the staff had been asking me about him. And when Eric called me, it was from Abe's phone. So when Abe's name and number popped up, my first thought was, only Abe could pull this off. My heart had passed away, so I knew it. But it just made me think. It was Eric, and he asked me to speak a moment about his father's relationship with his employees, people that work for him. In the Teamsters Union, and Eric was explicit and said, I want you to talk about how the union and two people, his father and I, on opposite sides many times in some adversarial positions, made it work. And we made it work for the good of the company and our members that work for him. And he had a service to provide to his customers, whether it was Bellum, Steel Warehouse, whoever his client was. And Eric's answer is that we made it work because we both agreed 100%. And he was a proponent of this, that a company with hardworking group could pay better money, could provide health insurance, retirement benefit, and better life for their families. And he wanted that for his employees. He really did. And Abe agreed that hardworking employees were deserving of respect and fair treatment. So we agreed to, apply that guideline and resolve contract, settle grievances, and provide secure jobs for the future, protect the company's business and his employees' jobs. And it was a win-win for everybody, because he was successful, and our members, his employees, were successful, and his clients, where he had people, were successful. So during his career, we built many employers. He was never late with a paycheck. He always paid people's pension on time, the health and welfare on time. And when he agreed to a labor contract, he lived up to it. And if you resolved an issue with him,
it was over and we moved forward. There was never any get even or animosity. And if a year later that same issue came up and you reminded it, hey, we worked that out a year ago. He said, hey, you're right. You really didn't have to write much down with him because he kept his word. So many freight reporters that know about his history sought his advice. He was the chairman of the local freight committee, the state of Indiana, the Central States Board Chairman. He served on the International Union Freight Committee for the employer side to resolve grievances between the Teamster local unions and trucking employers in the entire United States. Every state, it was called the national hearing. He would attend that. Sarah probably remembers him being gone every 3 months for about 4 days. And he would attend those. He was also president of the Motor Carriers, and that was a proponent of the industry. Under Abe's leadership, when their family owned South Bend Freight Line, they were one of the very most successful regional carriers in the United States of America until the day he sold the company. He sold that company because the federal government deregulated the industry. He had the wherewithal to say, hey, it's going to be hard to compete in the world. He saw that. And when he sold that company, he made sure that his employees were offered positions with the employer that bought that. And we worked that out and lived up to it. My father, Bob Warrington, began to work with Abe in the freight industry in 1976. And my dealings with Abe started January 1 of 84 to the present, 38 years ago. During that time, we settled many grievances, negotiated contracts covering these Teamster road drivers, city drivers, dock workers, mechanics that worked for South Bend Freight Line, Veritech Division, and other companies where he provided lease drivers to provide services for mechanics, office employees, and drivers. He did a lot of work with Steel Warehouse and M&S and many other companies. And he was very proud of the fact that he did all that. And like Dr. Sanders said, I don't know how he balanced every board he was on either. And we sometimes took advantage of the fact that he was on those boards to reach out to him for help if we were in negotiations with their employers or something. He was always willing to listen. But he was understanding. If you worked hard and you did your best, if you had a problem as an employee, he would work with you, and he believed in open communication and discussion to solve problems. He would sit down and work it out if the person had a problem. And there was only 2 things that he wouldn't tolerate from anybody for any reason. And if somebody that lied to him, it's dishonest. Other than those 2 items, with an employee that we represented in the union, that we had an agreement with him, had a health issue, a marriage problem, family problem with children who needed time off, needed time to care for them. You can sit down with him and work it out to keep that employee working. So they had no insurance. They can take care of their family, protect their job. And he had a saying, he'd say, hey, we're all human, we all make mistakes. Everyone in life sometimes needs help. He would work with the people, the local community to help those kind of people. The other thing that's always memorable about him was he valued work. And he liked providing work to other people so they could better themselves. And Eric, I guess that's the answer you wanted. That's how it worked between him and the team. That's how we made it work. He will be missed by all, and God bless his family. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob, for those words. You know, I was thinking as you were speaking, it's we all want to be loved by our family, and we all want to have good relationships with friends. But in our country, the assumption is that employer and employees are adversaries. To hear the admiration that employees have for Abe and the respect that he had for his employees is one of the most remarkable aspects of Abe's one of his great gifts. Abe also had relationships with many people in town, business relationships. Obviously, one of the companies that he had the closest relationship, the family, was the Lerman family. And I understand that somebody from the Lerman family is going to speak on behalf of the Lermans. We're going to call him Mike Lerman to speak.
I know he would have a wisecrack to me when I have to put the microphone down. In my throat. My family and I are honored to be asked to speak on our dear departed friend, Dave Marcus. My brothers, Dave and Jerry, have known and worked with Dave on a variety of projects that began over 50 years ago. Unfortunately, Jerry is recovering from COVID and is unable to attend today. And so Dave asked me to include his thoughts in my remarks. So you only have to listen to one limit today. For decades, Abe served as a business partner, trucking operations, as our representative in collective bargaining, as was mentioned, and as an advisor and mentor for a variety of matters involving our companies. Each task that he undertook, Abe invariably displayed great skill, knowledge, wisdom, and integrity. In his loyalty to our company and our family, our community, and our family, Abe was without peer. But like my friend Mark, it seems kind of hollow, it seems kind of limited. So these words and sentiments only tell a small part about Abe. I'm not sure where to start. Fortunately, in this week's Torah portion, we get some direction. See, this week's portion was about the flood, Noah and the flood. So I'd like to share some thoughts that I heard from great Rabbi Abraham Twersky. Help me reflect a little bit more about it. So it's the Torah portion about Noah. We learn about the flood that the Almighty brought about through the incredible decay, decadence that the world has sunk to. Since Noah was considered a tzaddik, a righteous man, the Almighty decided to restart creation. And hopefully, the world would learn from the terrible mistakes from that generation, referred to as the Dor HaMara, the generation of the flood. So Noah was selected to start the process by building the ark, which would take 120 years, and populate it with his family, animals necessary for a restart. This was an awesome responsibility, and Noah was up to the task. Torah tells us, quote, I will bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh, wherein is the breath of life. Rabbi Twersky mentions, however, that in the Talmud there's a comment about the sentence. It's as follows. For this is as the waters of Noah unto me. In spite of the fact that Noah followed God's directions meticulously for over 120 years that it took to build the ark, this reference to the flood as being, quote, the waters of Noah, tells us that Noah was responsible for the flood. That seems harsh but it's due to the fact that he did not intercede to ask for mercy for his entire generation. This is compared to our patriarch, Abraham. No coincidence, folks. Abraham, who when he was informed by the Almighty about the impending destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, Abraham pleaded for the divine clemency for the people living there. When God told Moses that he intended to destroy the Jewish people for the sin, and that he intended to rebuild the Jewish nations from Moses' progeny, Moses interceded, stating that the Jewish people was not to be forgiven, and he did not wish to remain. Noah, on the other hand, accepted the divine offer, wasn't silent, that he and his family would be spared while the rest of mankind perished. Even though the Torah considers Noah as its eye, the Talmud considers him derelict to consider others. We learn from this a very powerful lesson, that it is not enough to be a just and upright person. It is not even enough to be a tzaddik, to be a righteous person. If one does not see beyond one's personal salvation, one is remiss. Every word that we've heard, family and friends, people spoke to that very point about our beloved Abraham. We refer to the patriarchs, Abraham, as Abraham Avinu, Abraham our father. And we refer to Moshe, as Moshe Rabbeinu, our teacher. It is to them that we are to heaven. I'm not sure if my friend ever read this explanation, but this much I can say. Abe was always doing for his family, for his community, his business associates, his people, and his. Abe had incredible strength and insight that he used to help others. He did not want special favors for himself. He was more concerned with the welfare of others. He was a true father and teacher. Abe was a visionary. I first got to know Abe, I like my friend Mark, both Abe and Sarah, when we got involved with the foundation, founding group of the South End School. Abe wasn't an easy sell. He wasn't so sure about it, but he was, I think it speaks to his personality and his ethos, his character. He was willing to listen. He was willing to be open about what it could do for our community, for the family, and for the Jewish people. He was a builder and a founder of our school, which started in 1974. He served as president and helped lead us through some very difficult times. The school started with 13 students in a rented space on the campus of the old St. Mary's Academy. We presided over the move to an unoccupied school in Mishawaka. I remember getting that phone call. Hey, get in your car, drive down whatever street it was, and then stop when you get there. And me and Bob took me around. And this was to be our home. And the negotiating that we did with the school city of Mishawaka was incredible. Today, the school's been relocated and environed in a much larger facility, and now we have over 200 students. In no small part due to the vision, support, and strength, and unselfishness of Abe Marcus. Abe was a loyal member of the Schulman family and supported all of the generous philanthropic efforts of the family. I remember so vividly having the pleasure to visit on Purim night, bring Shalom, and there was Abe and Art sitting there. Big Schultz, and Art Schultz. These guys were just fantastic people to talk to. And Abe would be down in his basement with his crew, bringing Sean once. And what they always said, hope to see you next year. Hope to be here next year. Mike, please be number bring us next year. He was a proud father, son-in-law, uncle, grandfather. I'm sure there's some things I forgot. And he was a friend to so many of us who were privileged to know and work with him. In thinking about our loss of Abe, I want to share a story that I've told many times. It's given me some comfort in times like this. It's a true story that I heard over 30 years ago. There was a member of a community who was a righteous man, very, very fine man. Much like our beloved Abe. This man did so much for so many people. He did it in a quiet, unobtrusive, meaningful way. He was always there for the community. Unfortunately, he was stricken with a terrible sickness, was hospitalized for some period of time. He was very close, this person was, to his rabbi. And the rabbi was a frequent visitor to his friend and community member. Things were deteriorating, and during the rabbi's last visit to his friend, he came upon the doctor who was in charge of treatment. The rabbi asked the doctor, "How's my friend doing? Is he improving?" The doctor replied very directly, "Rabbi, I'm afraid your friend is not doing well. In fact, he has very little time left." The rabbi was crestfallen, he was distraught with the news. The doctor continued, "Rabbi, I know that you're upset, but as you know, no one lives forever." The rabbi responded, "Doctor, we must live forever, or we haven't lived at all." Abe was taken by the plague. Abe was taken by the Almighty, but his reputation, his legacy, his mitzvahs will continue to live among all of us. Abe will continue to live if we can emulate what his life was about. Indeed, Abe will continue to live forever. Deepest condolences, his wonderful and lovely family. May his memory be a blessing.
Thank you, Mike, for those beautiful words and family's closeness with Abe. That beautiful Torah that you shared with us. And now I'd like to call on.
I'm Eric. I'm Abe's favorite son from. Dad was, as you've heard, I feel like I'm on a repeat button here. Dad was the epitome of a role model, a mensch. Dad's not someone who I would come to for advice. I just didn't do that, but everything that I did, I learned from him from observing his deeds. He was like Superman. He take care of everyone in our family. My mom's parents, his father when he moved here, his mother's, my mom's sister, her financial matter, of course, my mom, who has her own health issues, is always taking care of everybody. Actually, since my dad passed away, I've been holding his phone in my pocket. Like, I've been like watching it like it's mine, because I know it was such a part of him. People would call my dad for anything, and he would help them. You know, we'd be at dinner or something, so the phone at all times, just like, hold on a second, just taking care of other people's needs as he took care of ours. As dad myself, I honestly don't know how he did it all. As a kid, I recall there were weeks where he'd have a meeting, you know, he'd work all day, get up early in the morning, and in the evening, he'd have a meeting for the synagogue, a board meeting for the synagogue, a board meeting for the Hebrew school that he was president of. He would work a bingo fundraiser 2 times a week for the school to keep it afloat. And then mom and dad would go out almost every Saturday night with their friends. And then in between, he would come to our soccer, our hockey games. He would take a monthly trip down to Indianapolis for the grievance committee meeting that Bob mentioned. I forgot about the national meetings that he would go to. My dad was never someone who would just like sit down and watch TV. The only time he'd do that maybe to watch football game or something like that. Let's see, I recall doing, like Mark said, power walking with Susan Sandbach, and later Dick Beeching at like 5:30 in the morning. Head off to work before the sunrise, attend morning service at the synagogue. He did this up until the last few months, even while battling his own health issues. And I have never once heard him complain. I never once heard him say, this is too much, I'm doing this, I'm tired. Like, never once heard him complain. I think in my whole life, and just figure out a way to get it done. As a proud grandfather, he'd come up to drive to Chicago, see the girls' gymnastics meets in Indianapolis. You know, to see them, he'd drive for hours to see them compete for, you know, a total of 3 minutes. And Dad, as I said, Dad took care of everyone else, including himself, except in the rare instances when he couldn't. Even after a liver transplant, 2 cancers. In fact, when he recently got gravely ill, I reached out to Mark, and Mark Sandbach, his friend who spoke earlier, and I said, Mark, I don't know what to do here, because Dad always took care of himself. And with his issues, I don't even know where to begin. And I thank him for his guidance and helping me through all that. Dad loved attending sporting events and watching sports and taking us to games. Notre Dame basketball, football, of course, throughout the years. He took me to the Orange Bowl when I was 4 years old, and I still remember that. Like I believe it was a national championship between Notre Dame and Alabama. We went to the game of the century, Florida State versus Notre Dame in the early 90s, and big games against UCLA, DePaul, at Notre Dame basketball. And there was, of course, Notre Dame hockey and Cubs games and Bears games, and for a while, he and Mom had Bulls and Blackhawks tickets. Again, I don't know how to know. This is crazy to me. I was finally able to pay him back for all those things by getting tickets to the Cubs, Cleveland in the World Series in 2016. We went to Game 5, and then we helped them cheer that 1-2 victory to eventual World Series championship. I don't think I consciously ever thought like, I want to be like my dad when I grow up. It's just not something that I thought of. But as I reflected on life in the last few days, I just would love to be the type of role model for my kids and my wife and my family and my friends like he's been to me. I miss you, Dad.
I've written a lot over the last few days, so I feel like I've said a lot already. When I was trying to think of more to say, one thing I wanted to add was when you look back at your childhood and oftentimes you look at why why you have problems as an adult, but oftentimes you don't look at why you have strengths as an adult, why you are the person you are, and why you have strengths, and why you're able to function well. And I really I credit my parents for that, and something that you know, when I really deconstruct my life and the resilience that I've had during my life and I've shown during my life, and the flexibility that I've been able to have, and those are two things that I think I've taken for granted. And I see as a teacher, you see that these are two characteristics that a lot of kids lack, and they really struggle with. And as teachers, we're asked to teach them these skills, and we try, but these are really things that are taught by parents. And I never realized that I was taught these things by my parents, but I definitely was. You know, my dad was never one to have us dwell on failures. We were expected to move on and move on to our next successes. And the expectation was that we would always do well. It wasn't that we would be perfect, but that we would always do well, and so we did well. So that's something I definitely have taken for granted throughout life, and it's such an important way to be raised. In terms of flexibility, that's something definitely I got from Dad. I've had so many different careers, even within my career, and Dad always taught me to learn new skills and be open to learning new skills. And you know, Dad at 79 had more tech skills than a lot of 16-year-olds. I mean, and I would never say this to someone, but you know, my dad format an Excel spreadsheet really easily, and a lot of people can't. Like he was very tech savvy, and you know, very, very good at that. And you know, whenever I face a tech challenge and I have the urge to just ask someone younger than me to do it, I think of my dad, and I think like, no, I'm going to learn it myself and make sure that I know how to do this. And so I'm constantly making sure that I'm up on my game, and that I'm able to do anything, and really recognizing the impermanence of the world, and that I need to be ready to be able to do anything. And that's when people say, like, you know, we really never knew what he did for a living. I mean, and people sometimes thought he was sketchy, because they would ask, like, what did, you know, when someone says, what does your dad do, and you can't answer the question, sketchy. And so the truth was, it's just that he could do anything, and so that's something that he's passed on. He's passed on to me. I feel like I can do anything, and if need be, I will, and that confidence isn't like hubris or anything. It's because he told me that you need to be able to do that in this world. It's important, and because you need to rely on yourself, and I expect you to rely on yourself. And so I said, okay, I will. So that's what my dad told me, and when you know this last week was very, very, very difficult, and something that I wrote this, but I don't know if everyone read this, but something that I told him was that every time I make a decision, I think, what would my dad do? And he told me that made him feel good. And I didn't just say that to make him feel good. It's actually the truth. And I'll include just one last thing is, you know, the hardest thing about being Abe Marcus's daughter is that the world is not filled with Abe Marcuses. And so, and that was, I think, the hardest adjustment to becoming an adult and working in general anywhere, is that you encounter people, and you're like, you know, they don't act fairly or in good faith or whatever it is. You're like, oh, that's unfortunate. You know, my dad wouldn't do that. And so when I would talk to my dad about these things, he would say, okay, move on. You know, move on. Just move on to the next thing. Deal with it, move on. And so that, I would say that would be the hardest thing about being his daughter, is that not everyone is good as he is. But yeah, having him as a dad is a big blessing.
I'm RJ, Marcus, the favorite son. I never got to go to any of the sporting events, so I was not later. I'm having a flashback to my bar mitzvah. My dad and I were different, but we were kind of the same also. Kind of looked the same a little bit, and people would always come up to me and say, "Oh, you're Abe Marcus's son." And are you going into the business? And I would say, no, I'm not going into business. That was something I just did not appeal to me or anything like that. I was always kind of math, science person, astronomy person, always. And none of the business aspect of family really interested me until later on. A lot's been said, and I think everyone kind of understands the theme of my dad's life. It's kind of hard to write it down and talk about it over 2 minutes. I remember some things. I remember when I was a kid, my dad would pick me up from Hebrew school, and this was, I mean, I'm very good with dates and everything. This was in 1977, and he had a Pacer. We had a ABC Pacer. I think about that, just that blows my mind. But it was a 3-speed, and he'd pick me up, and we'd be talking about our day. You know, I was 11, and he was, you know, probably had
board meetings or whatever. But we were kind of like friends, and he would push down on the clutch, and I would shift, and we were always in sync. And I remember saying, you know, you're really doing that really well. I don't know why that came to my mind, but it was kind of a symbolic thing. I don't know, it just had to be inside my mind, I guess. My dad was always at my hockey games. He was never really one to push me, you know, to do sports or anything like that. It just kind of evolved. I remember when I was a little kid, he told me that the Mormons had approached him and asked me if I wanted to play hockey. They, at the time, well, I still do, they own the ice box. And he said to me, hey, you should play hockey. Yeah, I didn't really know how to ice skate very well, but never really pushed me. And there was one game where I think we lost every game that year. And except for one, we tied 0-0. That was the time that I was a goalie, and it was like, oh, only career. My dad never, you know, there were a lot of good games and there were some bad games, but he never got on me, never, you know, told me you're gonna do better or anything. He give me a lifesaver for every goal that I gave up, and you know, move on to the next next game. There was a commercial about that lifesavers. But it was kind of another symbolic thing in life that I never really thought about until recently. And you know, you let it go in, and you know, you can't dwell on it. You just go on, and you got to play the rest of the game. And later on, it became golf that I got interested in high school, and then later on, became a fanatic about it. But my dad and I were trying to play as much as we could. Didn't always work out with our schedule, but you know, in golf, you play the ball where it lies, you know, for better or for worse. And it's very symbolic of kind of our relationship. Also, one kind of funny story that I tell it all the time when I'm working is that I remember I was going into 7th grade, and I remember we were out to dinner, and I had to fill out what language I wanted to take for 7th grade. I was in 6th grade, and he said, "Well, you know, if you want to do something in science, I would take German. You either take German, French, or Spanish." It's 1979, and so I ended up taking 8 years of German. I always tell people at work that was like the dumbest thing I ever did. It doesn't work. Spanish is much more practical. But you know, would have known that, you know, over 40 years ago. My dad, I remember one of the things my dad told me about, probably the biggest thing one of the biggest things he told me was about credibility. If you lose your credibility, you've lost everything. And it doesn't matter what you do in life. And I always remember that, and I always try to stay true to that. That was probably one of the biggest things one of the biggest lessons that he instilled in me. And I always think about that. There were some other things that he's kind of a practical guy. We didn't have one of these. We didn't have these, birds and bees, conversations or anything like that. I remember when I was going to college, my dad said to me, "All right," and he said, "I don't care what you do. I just don't want a fraternity suit." That's kind of how he was, you know, direct your face like, yeah, right, yeah, of course, that. Couldn't argue with that. Later on, he was always very good at, I'd always talk to him about, you know, decisions that I made. You know, credit my mom and dad, you know, we decided to, last spring, Robin and I decided to move out to Scottsdale, which was kind of a big deal because, you know, my dad's health was kind of failing and my mom's got her deals, whatever, but they were big proponents of it. Like, yeah, go for it. Yeah, you know, kind of like, you only live once, and it really took a lot of pressure off me. And Robin too, but I didn't want me. But I was really shocked at that kind of. I didn't think they would be so open to that. Now maybe they had ulterior motives. I don't know. Another thing is, everyone talks about the schedule that he ran and everything. I don't know how he did this. I mean, the last couple of years I was did a lot of administrative stuff and have to deal with different personalities and complaining and this and that, just about minutiae stuff, stupid things. And this is what he did his entire career. And I did it for 2 years and I was wiped out. You know, it's just amazing how he's able to do that. I mean, credit is people skills, and which I think was probably his best asset. One of the things that when I was in high school and going into college, we had me work at our warehouse, but it wasn't like in an office or anything. It was actually moving the freight into the trucks and everything like that, and it was a very good experience. I didn't really realize it at the time, but you know, I think he wanted me to work with people that, well, how should I say, maybe not had made the best choices in life, and you know, so for example, we'd be working with some people, and you know, we'd go out to lunch or something like that, and the next week you'd see on TV. Crime Stoppers. Have you seen this man? He killed someone else. I'm like, that's Earl. So it was a great experience to be able to interact with people that maybe were down and out. Maybe they were killers or whatever, but it helped me a lot later on in my own career. And actually, people at work were kind of making fun of me about that. You're like, here, man, why don't you go in anesthesia? You like to talk to these people. It's kind of an innate thing I inherited from him. Anyway, I can go on and on and on. You know, my dad, I think when it was all said and done, my dad lived a very full life. You know, and from a guy who came here came to college as a chicken farmer, and I think even he would say that he made it to the top in some way or another, and you know, he was never a complainer like everyone said. And I think he would appreciate that everyone came out here for this. I think he would probably say, you know, don't dwell on this a whole lot and move on. And you know, that's what we're gonna do. So, thank you.
So many tributes and so many beautiful memories. shout out to Maya, who's been a mensch sitting through all this, coming all the way from Israel, and she's been very, very polite listening. So you got your call. I want to begin with a letter from a friend of Abe's, Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, who goes on hearing Abe's passing. I was saddened to hear the news of Abe Marcus passing. Found myself immediately reflecting on the experience of getting to know him well over the years I served as mayor. All who know Abe will know that what I mean when I start by mentioning a certain affectation of grumpiness, which could be intimidating if you did not know him. And if you were, for example, a young candidate approaching him to ask him for his support in your election. But you will also likely recognize my experience of finding almost immediately that any such gruffness came with a kind of a wink. The wink gave way to a smile, and that the deeper fact about Abe's character was a very deep warmth, which radiated with his great love for the people and the community that he cared so much about. He was often the first to text me feedback after a TV appearance at 6 in the morning, a reflection of both his morning work ethic and his deep attention to community manners. Often out of view, Abe helped to shape our city in countless ways, from the recovery of our downtown to the growth of our airport, and far more people will benefit from his leadership than will ever know how important of a role he played. We will miss him, but we will be very glad of his memory for a long time to come. Thank you, Mayor Pete. There's so many tributes. Allow me to share some words of Torah. Yesterday, as Mike noted, we read from the Torah portion of Noah. And a more appropriate opening verse could not have been written to help us remind us of our beloved Abe. Eila told Noah ish tzadik b'dorotav. This is the line of Noah. Noah was a righteous man in his generation. All of us who knew Abe Marcus would agree that here was a righteous person. The root of the word tzaddik can also mean charitable, as we know the word tzedakah. Abe was certainly that. Tzedek can also mean justice, and Abe, as we've heard so many comments, and his dealings with others was fair, honest, and just. Now, there's a dispute among the sages, though, as to what the qualifier, the Dorotav, in his generation indicates. Does it limit Noah's righteousness? That is, in his generation, he was considered righteous, but in another generation, he would not be so impressive. Or does it magnify his greatness? If Noah was righteous in a generation, it was as wicked when he lived in. How much the more so if he had been a righteous person in a generation like Abraham's? To answer whether in our Abraham's case, to ask if Abe Marcus was a tzaddik b'dorotav, if that limited or magnified his greatness, we need to look at another Talmudic dispute. In a discussion of what one should study to achieve the level of piety, chassidut, the majority view suggests that one should study the text called Brachot, which teaches about prayers and blessings. Rava suggested, which makes sense, Rava suggested one should study Pirkei Avot, which concerns ethical teachings of sages. But Rabbi Yehuda said no. If one wants to achieve piety, study the laws of Nizikin, damages, which is all about interpersonal relations and business dealings. Now, why would Rabbi Yehuda suggest this? We usually think of piety as about ethics or religious observance, but Rabbi Yehuda understood it is not so hard for a person who prays all day or who studies ethics to achieve or be thought of as pious. But business? Since the goal of business is to make a profit, and the more profit one makes, the more successful, it is so much more tempting for piety to elude one engaged in trade for profit. Thus, one who engages in business practices according to the teachings of Nizikin, to strive to be fair and honest and to go beyond the basic level of decency in business, that person has achieved a level of piousness. And Abe Marcus was pious. Years ago, we brought a young rabbinical student from the seminary to be our summer intern. And he met Abe and noticed how Abe came to Minion every weekday morning. Now, in the world of rabbinical school, one appreciates that an average Jew comes to the synagogue 3 times a year. An active Jew comes every Shabbat, but the pious Jew comes every morning. The student noticed after a few weeks, though, that he never saw Abe on Shabbat. So it didn't compute with him. Well, how does a person who comes every day, committed to coming to shul every day, doesn't come on Shabbat? It didn't make sense to him. And I said to him, Abe comes on weekdays because he knows we struggle to get a minyan, basic quorum of 10 for a worship service on weekdays. But on Shabbat, we don't have to worry about that. Abe is there when we need him. Adam, as we heard in his talk, Abe's grandson once asked Abe, why do you have so many jobs? And Abe said he didn't need to do them, but somebody had to do them. As long as he could, he would. Abe was always there when you needed him. The mantra in the community was, as Mark mentioned, and also members of the Lerman clan would say, when one was unsure about a decision or a direction to go in, just ask Abe. Or when we needed to go get an auto sales company to lend us a car for the summer, because we put interns in, and we would need a car for them for the summer. Well, I would always bring Abe with my negotiations. Who's going to give a car to some rabbi for the summer? But, and I would always introduce myself in these negotiations as the rabbi of Sinai Synagogue, and Abe Marcus, who of course the only thing I knew, he's my rabbi for everything else. As Mayor Pete, now known as Secretary of Transportation, stated in his fond recollection that Abe was a straight talker. He gave you a dispassionately honest answer. Like when he told Karen, his daughter-in-law, that her website picture for her business looked like she just came out of a wind tunnel. And he would never buy anything from somebody who looked like they just came out of a wind tunnel. But you accepted the honest assessment because you knew that he cared about you and was only telling you a hard truth because he cared. When I was interviewing for this position at Sinai almost 30 years ago, Abe was on the committee, and it was a phone interview. And I was talking about the importance of creating a worshiping and caring community, and something that sounded to me very inspirational. Abe cut me off as I was speaking and said, okay, that's all very nice, Rabbi, but here's the question. How are you going to get me to come to shul? I probably stammered and fumbled around for an answer since I didn't really know who this Abe person was. Of course, now I can imagine he was rolling his eyes as I was giving this inspirational talk. But when we started our morning meeting at Sinai, Abe was there every morning. He was there because he knew that it was important to my vision, and he supported that. And he wasn't only our opener, baseball they have no openers, not just closers. So he wasn't only our opener, he led the Sukkah Gezimra most mornings, but he was wonderfully encouraging to others to take leadership positions in Minyan. Lila, Abe's granddaughter, mentioned that when she thinks about her Zaidi, she always thinks about Abe's generosity. Abe's generosity came in many forms. Some were large gifts, as we know, and especially the tzedakah that he did through his time and energy. But much of his generosity was very targeted. Someone in the congregation would have a need, and he would make a donation to the discretionary fund so that the assistance could be given anonymously. Every year, Abe bought 3 lulavim and a trobim for Sukkot. One for himself that he would immediately lend to someone who were in the shul who didn't have one, and 2 that he gave away. Abe's support, as we heard, was crucial in starting the South Bend Hebrew Day School along with his father-in-law, Abe Schulman, who looked on Abe as a son. Now, Abe went to Purdue on a scholarship. He was a chicken, he came from, his father was a chicken farmer, and he came to Purdue because an older brother, Liz Harris, had gone to Purdue, and so Abe followed his older brother. The first day, Sarah Schulman was on campus at the Hillels, so shout out to Hillels. They met, and that started a lifelong love and friendship. 2 years later, they were married, and due to the fact that Abe was only 20, his dad had to sign permission for the marriage. And this began a beloved marriage of 58 years. Now, Abe came to South Bend from a job in Midland, Michigan, because it was Sarah who wanted to raise her family around her family. So our sister, we all have to appreciate how important Sarah was in bringing Abe to South Bend. Thank God for her wanting to raise her family amongst her family in South Bend. Abe joined his father-in-law's business, South Bend Freight, and this was, of course, the first of many businesses that he operated in our city. Abe has served this community to a tremendous degree. He served as chair of president, as we heard, of 8 nonprofit organizations since they moved to South Bend, back to South Bend in 1967. He was a member of many, many more. At the time of his passing, he was chair of the board of St. Joseph Health System, president of the St. Joseph County Airport Authority, and appropriately, he was inducted into the South Bend Hall of Fame in 2018. It's fair to wonder how people who give so much to their community have time for their family. We never hear about, what kind of a family man Moses was, for example. Yet Abe's center was his family. Ava, another of Abe's favorite granddaughters, told me that when she thinks about her Zeta, she thinks about how he and Sarah's home was the center point for the family. Abe was the rock, she said, who grounded the family. And Talia noted that Abe never picked favorites because everyone was Abe's favorite child, or in-law, or grandchild. He would just be very specific, as we heard. You're my favorite grandchild who lives in Deerfield, or who lives on this particular street. Everybody was Abe's most beloved. And so our hearts go out to Abe's beloved son. I think we can say, we don't need a qualifier for Sarah. Sarah was Abe's favorite wife. Most beloved person. And of course, his favorite children are Jay, Eric, and Sharna, his favorite daughters and son-in-law, Robin, Karen, and Leora. And of course, his very favorite grandchildren, Talia, Adam, Lila, Ava, Lila, Maya, and Benjamin. And that is how it is with the pious who truly know how to love. They can love their family as well as those outside of the family. The end of the Parsha of Noah ends with the world in disarray once again. But we're given a glimmer of hope for the future. A new hero of faith emerges, Abraham Avinu. For so many of us, when we were in disarray, we just called our Abraham. There is no replacing the person of wisdom. In the book of Job, we read, there are mines for silver and places where gold is refined. But where can wisdom be found? And where is the source for discernment? A person of wisdom, where shall his replacement be found? There is no replacement for such a person as Abe Marcus. But each of us are better for having known a tzaddik like Abe. The role of tzaddikim in this world is to give us a model of how we could be. Most of us don't reach this level. But in striving for that model, we not only grow ourselves, but we keep a portion of that ish tzaddik, that righteous person in this world. Zecher tzaddik u'bracha. May Abe Marcus's memory be a blessing for all of us. We're going to end the service now, and we're going to move to Hebrew Orthodox Cemetery for the interment. But I do want to mention before we leave here that after the service at the cemetery, family members and out-of-town guests will be coming back here for a meal of consolation, condolence. 6:30 this evening, there will be a Shiva service, and then people can express their condolences. They'll be back here at Sinai 6:30 tonight, the service, and then people can express condolences to the family. Monday and Tuesday, people can meet at Abe and Sarah's house to observe the mitzvah of the Humam Edim. 5:30 to 8, we'll have a service at 6 o'clock so the family can say Kaddish. At this time, I'm going to ask everyone to please rise as we recite. שחלף לעולמו וגם עדן תהינו
Hato, Ana Balaracham, Masirei, the Seder, Kinafet, Levelamim, which Lord of Rachim and Nishmato, I was not told, Yellow, Shalom, Mishkabom, Nomar, Amen. Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence of the Holy Pure to the soul of the eight Marcus, who has gone to his eternal home. Merciful one, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in their eternal embrace. May his soul be bound up in the bond of life. May he rest in peace. And we say, Amen. At this time, I'd like to call for the pallbearers to assist the pallbearers.
Diana, Telegram, Diana, Polish Telegram, Nefesh, Yadecha, Tzedek, Malay, Necha, Rachim, Al Peichata, Ton, Yadecha, Tomar, Malach, Herefez, Yadecha, Gadola, Tzav, Rabba, Lilla, Asher, Inecha, Shikot, Al Tolda, Favor, Love, the Hagid, Yashar, and I to read about the and the name of God, the name of God, the nation, and the name of Allah, and the of the terrible way of speech, that of Allah, she was so long, your told on the phone. The rock, God's work is perfect, and all God's ways are just, the faithful God never falls through his way of God. The rock is perfect in every way. Who can question God about God's deeds? God rules below and high, causing death that giving life to the dead, giving down to the grave and also raising up. The rock perfect in every deed. Who can ask God, what are you doing? God's word is fulfilled and graciously deal with us. Just in all God's ways, the rock is perfect, patient, and compassionate. Has pity for parents and children, as forgiveness and compassion and miracle man. You are just the Lord, is causing death, but also in giving life to the dead. In your hand are all spirits. Far be it from you to blot out our remembrance. Consider us with mercy, for compassion, and forgiveness are yours, O Lord. The soul of all life is in your hand. Your might is filled with justice, wondrous and purpose, mighty indeed. You see all the ways of mortals, giving each according to their ways, the fruit of their deeds. Proclaim the Lord is just, God is in your wrath, and in there is no prayer. The Lord is given, and the Lord is taken, praise given in the Lord. The human person is a integration of the physical and the spiritual. At the moment of death, the spiritual element that God has given us returns to it, but we are responsible to assist our loved ones in their return to their physical selves. And so after I put some symbolically cover the grave with dirt, then we'll those who wish can come forward and participate in this loving act to cover our loved one with a blanket of earth.
I went to find nothing.
You are.
Or supervisor.
I don't know.
It's completely organized. Yeah, come do No, I mean, like, oh, wow. Hi, how are you? Good. So there. 28. Yeah, yeah, most definitely. Yeah. I think you're in Sunshine, maybe a mild hotline. Yeah. I own a piercing and painting business. Yeah. Oh, I love it. Very busy. I've been doing it about 9 years. At this time, we're going to pause. Thank you. As Abe would say, you know, if you're going to do a job, you do it right. So thank you. The dust returns to the earth as it was, but the spirit returns to God who gave it. May Marcus's soul be bound up in the bond of life eternal. Send comfort, O Lord, to those who mourn. Grant strength to those whose burden is sorrow, and we say amen. At this moment, before we ask the family to gather to recite the Kaddish prayer, just want to let people know that family and out-of-town guests are welcome back at Sinai for the meal of condolence. And tonight from at 6:30 to 8:30, the family will be sitting at Sinai. So if you wish to observe the mitzvah of Nechum Avelim, you can do so at Sinai 6:30 to 8:30 tonight. Tomorrow and Tuesday at the home of Sarah and Abe from 5:30 to 8. And there'll be a service tonight at 6:30 for the family to say Kaddish, 6 o'clock tomorrow to say Kaddish. And at this time, we invite the family to rise to recite the Kaddish prayer. Yikadal, Yitkadash, Shemei Rabbah, Yalma Divra Chirutei Yamulich Malchutei, B'chayachon, B'yomechon, B'chayei, B'chol, Beit Yisrael, B'agala, B'vizman, Kari, B'imru, Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah Morach Le'olam, Amen. Yitbarach, Yishtabach, Yitpa'ar, Yitmamam, Yitmasei, Yithadar, Yithalei, Yithala, Shemei, Yikudashah, Baruchu, Va'ela, Baruchu, Baruchata, V'shirata, Tishtachata, V'nichamata, V'amirim, V'amam, V'amirim, Amen. Yehei Shlama, Rabba, Ben Shemaya, V'chayim, Elim, V'yakol, Yisrael, V'amru, Amen. Osei Shalom V'nomah, Hu Yasei Shalom, Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael, V'amru, Amen. And at this time, we make a path between the community as the family walks between the path. And we recite these words of consolation. May God comfort you and all who have known His Zion and Jerusalem. Yeah, yeah. We're gonna hold it. We're gonna watch. Other family members can come walk through. Yeah. I don't know, but my
Thank you for attending. This concludes our services today at the cemetery.